If you've ever thought about buying a business, maybe you're thinking about buying one in 2026, you've probably heard that boring businesses are the place to look. The reason is they're just steady, they've got great cash flow, and they're not exciting, but they're absolutely needed. They have a lot of demand. They're boring because they're just the types of things that people need every day. There's nothing sexy or flashy about them, but they make good money. And that's why they're getting a lot more popular for people to look into buying. So today, we're going to look into three different boring businesses that you could buy in 2026 that might be a good buy, that might make you some good cash flow and potentially set up a good life for yourself. We're going to break down our thoughts on each of these three, and we're going to actually look at specific deals of businesses that are listed online for sale right now. We're going to start with a locksmith business. Ryan, what caught your eye about this one?
Well, the price to cash flow, that's a little under a 2x. And usually when you see that range, as we talked about in our last episode, we're usually very cautious. Like you're buying a job, you're kind of more going to be uh, heavily involved to a degree. Just heavily involved. But this one's a pretty light ask price, a pretty solid cash flow. We could say, oh, you can pay, quote, pay it off in 2 years. Obviously, that's not how this will work. But with everything involved, doing about 400K top line, 172 cash flowing. So, it's got quite a bit going on. I like the fact that they have employees. And the owner is also willing to stay on as an employee. So you would kind of walk into a business with, I think they said 4 employees already, and with the owner, that might make 5 actually. But 45 years, right? They have all the niceties that we like to see. And it's just a service that people will need pretty frequently, that people could do themselves, but it's more expensive to mess it up than it is to just have somebody do it correct the first time. When you're talking about landlords, buildings, anything involving tenants, they do have quite a wide range. So it seemed pretty tight altogether. Like they had 3 full-time, 1 part-time. The owner will come on as an employee. So you don't actually need to know about the job, and there's a lot to like. And they even offer the financing option, which is, it's pretty pretty decent. But in a size like this, I almost would say just maybe try to figure out how to get it through a bank so you don't have to deal with one loan, because 10% is fine. Um, but normally it's going to be an SBA thing, so it might be difficult to figure out. Okay, coming in with $300,000 in cash, and then wanting to finance the other 50.
Yeah, one thing I'll say about this one, I mean, I think this is a great business, first of all, a locksmith business. I mean, it's a great industry to be in. I think this is something that is just solid and steady. It's always needed. Clearly, if these numbers are correct, you can have great cash flow, great profit margin in this business. They're doing 439 and they've got 172 of cash flow. So, I mean, the owner might be working pretty heavily in it, probably is working pretty heavily in it, but that's about 40% margin. So pretty solid business. The one thing that jumps out about this particular deal, though, is I don't like what I'm seeing here. Retirement, but I'm willing to work as an employee. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think, I mean, if you adjust your expectations a little bit, maybe I wouldn't expect that the owner is actually going to continue to be an employee. They're probably going to take their check and run here. Um, and a business this small, I'd be a little bit worried about paying this much for this much cash flow if the owner is working pretty heavily in it, because you got to imagine that 172 in cash flow is probably with what they're paying themselves, and you're going to have to replace them to manage the business. So I find it doubtful that this one would work out in a way where you're not overpaying for it. But great industry.
It's one of those points that you bring up early in the conversation, because it will really set the tone for what you're willing to do. But I would imagine that there's truth to both. They're willing to stay on for a time, likely in a very much part-time role. But again, even if you just had them on, you get 2 weeks for free, And if you kept them as like a management employee and just said, hey, look, I'm going to pay you not to be out in the field, but to teach me for the next 3 months, that might be something you can work out. So for all the discrepancies, if you catch them early on and you kind of get the long and the short of it, you can kind of figure out whether or not this is worth pursuing. And to your point about just cashing the check and running, if they are going to stick around as an employee for 3 more months as at X rate, you get it all settled before you sign the contracts. Get it in writing, because just because they give you a verbal doesn't mean it's actually going to happen. So they could still just block your number and walk with the check. They told you they could. Not to say this would happen, but there's certainly a lot of instances where people promise one thing, don't get it in writing, and then completely ignore it.
One thing I'll say too is you might not want, like if you're buying a business, you might not want to keep the previous owner in. They're probably going to have their own ideas about how they want to run the business. They might not be open to the different things that you want to do to grow it. So you might want to just expect not to have them on in the first place. As I think about some of the strategies that we've taken with growing, established businesses, sometimes we're doing things that are new and exploratory and we're trying new things. And, this business has been running for a while, this one since 1976. So clearly someone who's been running this for a while probably has an idea of how they would like it to run, maybe resistant to new ideas, especially as someone who's going to continue to be an employee. They might be pushing back, might be a little bit of a battle. So you might not want that either. Just comes down to preference and what you're kind of looking for in the deal. But on to the next one that we're going to look at. This one was pretty unique. I actually had not seen something like this before. Another very small business. This one's even smaller. This one looks like it's very much just you're buying a little bit of a job. But if you could get it for a little bit better price than what they're listing it for here, maybe not so bad. Looks like it's doing really, really good margins as well. This one's doing 86,000 in cash flow off of 184 in revenue. So it's a little over 45% margins. What do you think about this one?
I did like it because I thought scale to size, it was actually pretty decent. If you live down here, you know how many businesses are in buildings that have awnings. And that sounds like a weird thing to say, but I know when I lived in New Jersey, it was just overhangs and usually mostly cement. But in Florida, a lot of extra sun coverage due to the weather around here. So locationally speaking, geographically, you're in a good spot for this type of thing. And 170K, if you're really looking to take on something where it's just like you'll buy a job, but if you're really passionate about it and you really enjoy it, you could scale this up over a couple years and definitely get yourself more removed from it. But you're certainly buying yourself into something. So I would imagine with that cash flow, if you're hiring on somebody else, you're probably bringing home a negligible amount of money after debt service. Obviously, if you just pay cash, it's that much easier. But I think for somebody who's starting or who is just looking to get out and do something, this might be the opportunity.
Couple things I like about this. They listed in here as a good add-on for a certain type of business. I actually do agree with that. This does sound like the type of thing that someone would just want to kind of set it and forget it. They would find someone that does this and say, all right, yeah, if I need this service, I don't really want to think too much about it. Just do it every once in a while. So I do actually like it as an add-on, but I think you'd be overpaying at this price. But I think buying the customer list and the kind of repeat customers that they're getting, not a bad move here, depending on what you're doing. If you're serving a lot of the types of businesses that you could add this on to. It seems like and maybe I'm wrong here, I just don't know much about it. It seems like a very easy service to find someone for. Doesn't seem like it'd be a very difficult thing to execute on. So, if you got into this business and weren't able to keep the employees, you could jump in and start doing it yourself maybe, or potentially find someone without too much difficulty. So not as much risk there either. The one thing that gives me a little bit of pause with something like this does seem like the type of thing that if there was a downturn in the economy, I think it's a little bit more elective, and I think some businesses might start cutting things like this.
I tend to agree. It's the danger of the low cost where it can be the first to be cut because it isn't generating as much or it has the most downturn. I mean, when people are trying to cut, if a business is getting squeezed, they're going to cut their extra services like that, and they're just going to get a mop and just get on a step stool and kind of try to scrub it. But again, like I think, for somebody who's very tenacious and likes to door knock, do a lot of on the ground hitting the pavement stuff, probably could still work out well. But I think if you're somebody who's looking for a more, I guess, established or something to tack on that will be something that people will always want, it may not run that route for you. It may be something where it's good for a little bit, but then when times are tough, it is one of the first services that people forego.
I would agree. We've got one more to look at as well. This one is personally my favorite of the ones that we've looked at so far. Now, when it comes to this actual specific one, it looks like it's got a sale in progress already. So this one's not available. But in general, this industry, I think, is rock solid. It's a very boring business, but this is one where you have complete protection from any kind of economic conditions, right? If the economy takes a turn, people are still going to be dying. It's not going to stop. This home care business, it's a brutal truth, but anything in the wedding industry or the death industry is usually a pretty solid business, they say. And this one is one that, I mean, I think it's a little bit low profit for what they're doing in revenue, in my opinion, from what I've seen from some of these. However, maybe they're running it in a way where it's very owner absentee. It does sound like they have a lot of full-time employees for this size of business, just a little over $1 million a year. So, lots of part-time, lots of contractors, makes sense for something kind of staffing based like this. But that is a lot of full-time employees. So my guess would be that the owner of this business has elected to have a lot of full-time people in place to take the load off of themselves. So there's a huge benefit to that. And I would also say that I think that the asking price here is pretty reflective of that. They're not asking for a big multiple, not even a 2x multiple. So I like this one from the perspective of what industry it's in. I also really like the price of this one.
I agree. I mean, I think I've looked at quite a few of these, and it's a pretty, you're definitely, you're more human heavy than I think people anticipate, because remember, if you're looking at it from the perspective of like a service, you're taking care of people's parents, family members, and whatever, and you're gonna be your pushback when it comes to a service issue is going to be probably a bit more extreme and forceful than say power washing or an awning. So one of the things that I would say is if you go into something like this where you're servicing either animals or people, steel yourself, because the customer facing side of it will be far more difficult and brutal than anything else where it involves like even vehicles. Like nobody's going to get mad their car got washed poorly than they are if their grandma forgot to get given her medication. So that's what I think people sometimes they kind of lightly gloss over, that they think about all the good and not, the bad stuff that comes along with the good stuff. So a word of caution when taking on something in an industry like this.
This one would certainly come with a lot of stress. That's a great point. And I think that, I mean, one of the things about business is a lot of times unfortunately, you pay the premium of stress for something with more cash flow. If it was easy, everyone would do it. You see that in business a lot of times. So these businesses, they're getting way more popular, but they're certainly not for everyone. This one's definitely going to take its toll a little bit, but it's got great cash flow, very boring business that's not going away anytime soon. So if you think you can stomach it, this could be a really good one.
No, I agree. I think that there's a lot to like about this one. And, as you said, if you can, doing this involves stress to all that degree, but at the same time, understand what stress you're willing to take on and what stress you're willing to avoid. I think that's a very important part of it. So when looking at businesses and what you want to do, figure out where your stress is going to be desirable and where you're like, that's a no stress zone. And then that's how you should also look at businesses beyond just their cash flow.
And the interesting thing with this one, not to be morbid here, but you see the seller is retiring, so seller could end up being a customer in this one as well.
Yeah, that is true. You could end up servicing the seller at some point, but
so Ryan, what would you say is your favorite part about this deal? What's your favorite deal of the ones that we've looked at?
for this one, I just love that, depending on your area, not that there's not old people everywhere, but I love how geographically it fits well with where we are in Florida. What they call the, death's waiting room to some degree. But it's a very hotly needed service, and there's never enough senior care, it seems. But I would say of all the ones here today, I really did like the locksmith. I felt like, despite the weird stuff with the owner and despite it being a family owned business, whether or not the family's name is on it is another question. But something that's very safe, if the cash flow reflects consistent relationships and good recurring revenue streams through either apartment building contracts, rental people, something along those lines that helps keep the flow of cash when maybe people aren't replacing the locks on their houses because of whatever reason. If I saw that, it'd be nice. I think it's a small win. I think it's an easy win. It's one where I would say the workload would probably match up between more of a part-time situation. And it would be one where I'd say if you were at a W-2 job, this one might be more approachable from saying, okay, I want to have a business on the side that just purely gives me a little bit of cash every month. And you could spend the rest of it putting it into the coffers of the business and paying, maybe bumping up a little bit of pay or incentives for the employees so that they definitely stick around so you can keep having that balance of a W-2 with that extra income to pay off whatever you want.
It's a great point. And I think if you've been listening to this and maybe you're interested in doing this, it's definitely an interesting move to make. This is something that I've seen a lot of people do effectively, is kind of stack this on the side of continuing to work your W-2. Something a lot of people don't realize is if you have strong W-2 income, it's one of the biggest things that's looked at by the Small Business Administration, who does SBA loans. And so if you've got strong cash flow, or if you've got strong W-2, you can leverage that into potentially making yourself even more cash flow. If you find the right business that is not going to require your kind of day-to-day presence, that's a big key. Especially if you're someone who works remote and you've got a little bit more flexibility, maybe. This is something that you might be able to work into your schedule. So definitely an interesting option, and something that sometimes allows people to create an exit path. Maybe they want to stay in their W-2 position for a year or two, let the business get established, start to understand it, how they can pull the levers in it, and then eventually go full time and be able to use that as a route to earn a little bit more freedom in their day and their week. And so definitely an interesting option to explore. But let us know what you thought was the most interesting business from the three that we covered. Let us know if there's other boring businesses you want us to cover next time. Ryan and I do this every Tuesday night, right around 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we look forward to hearing from you what you think. Put it in the comments if you had any thoughts about these. Maybe if you didn't like one, if you really did like one, maybe you're thinking about pursuing one of these deals, just let us know, or find Ryan or I on LinkedIn and message us there. You can find us at Ryan Santo MBA or Brody Vincent MBA on LinkedIn. And we'd love to hear what your thoughts are. We'd love to cover more deals like this. And until next time, see you then.